Okay, it's 6 o'clock and we're actually going pretty much on time. Hopefully we may have a few more people come in, but we might as well get started. My name's John Boutte. I chair the Southwest Common Council Education Committee and have been involved with fighting for the schools here for some time, along with John over there, who's in charge of the 19th Ward Schools Committee. So let's go around and people can introduce themselves so we all know who's here.
Hi, I'm Colleen McCarthy. I'm president of a neighborhood association on Monroe Avenue. I work at a local college. Well, I'm retired, but I'm still working. And I'm education chair of a group, citywide group called Many Neighbors, Building Neighborhoods MNBN.
Lisa Lee, proud principal at Dr. Charles D. Lunsford School number 19.
Lindsay Swanson. I moved to Rochester recently. I am considering opening a charter school for the city, and so I thought this was a great place to learn more about what's happening in education in the Southwest.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Eleanor Coleman. I'm with Catholic Family Center's Youth Build program, construction for 17 to 24-year-olds, and president of the Rotary Southwest.
I'm John Lang, and John already introduced me.
I'm Andrea Carvalho. I'm with the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning.
Okay.
Okay, and that is, in fact, we're going to review the budget overrun. I went down when the superintendent first had his review there, when the things were hitting the fan about the shortfall. And from what I got from him that day, it sounded like they were going to try to put a lid on any new hirings, but that they were going to try to keep the programs that were in place going as they figure out a little more thoroughly what's going on. And I think when I was at Monique's CTE meeting the other day, she is waiting to get the community school coordinator assigned, and it sounds like that's being delayed by that, Monique?
It does.
Okay. Any other input that anybody's heard on what's going on? Have you heard anything, John?
No, only what I've read in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
So, other than the percentage of the total budget is still a relatively small number, which is big when you think of it in millions of dollars.
Yes. 30 million out of 900 plus million is... So we'll see just where it all ends up, but that's...
It's a hell of a way to welcome your new superintendent.
I know, gee, the poor guy, it's a hard way to get started. But I got started with the fighting, going down and seeing superintendents probably back in 81 or 82 because of a budget shortcut. They hadn't overspent yet, but they were cutting back and laying off teachers, and I went down and talked to Laval Wilson and Adam Urbanski, who was president of the teachers union back then, and they did manage to keep the teacher we were fighting for. But so with that, we'll be seeing a lot more about what's going to be happening with the budget in the coming weeks and months. We've got Andrea Carvalho, who is here from the Lead Coalition, neighborhood outreach program, and she's going to cover a bit of what's going on in Rochester at this time. We always wish we had these things put to bed, and things are a lot better than they were, but
Yeah.
take it away.
Thank you for letting me join today, and I appreciate you guys letting me speak a little bit about where we are as a community with lead poisoning and why the coalition is still around, why it's still a problem. I'm sure in your line of work as educators, you probably have already heard a lot of stuff about lead, so I'm happy to elaborate on a point that I make anytime throughout this presentation, or if there's something you want me to go back or you have a question, please feel free to stop me. So it's also worth mentioning that this week is National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. So it's as good as week as any to be talking about this and learn more about the issue. So just to recap, I'm with the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning. We're an education and advocacy group, mostly volunteer run. I'm currently the only staff at the coalition. And our goal is to eliminate childhood lead poisoning, mainly through sharing information and empowering our community to know their rights when it comes to lead. So I always like to ask this question just to get a sense of what people know. So what do you think of when you think of lead poisoning? What comes to mind? Yeah.
Children eating paint chips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a big one that people think about is paint chips.
Permanent brain damage.
Definitely one of the biggest consequences of lead poisoning is it can lead to brain damage, and I'll talk more about that.
Nerve disorders that mimic ADD,
Yep.
Think about water quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people think about that. Flint, Michigan, especially.
Air quality before unleaded gas.
Exactly. That's one of the things I didn't know before starting this work, was that the reason why it's called unleaded gas is because there used to be leaded gas. Go figure. And leaded gas was banned in the 70s, but there are still consequences from that, especially like soil contamination, stuff like that. So so you guys touched on all the things that I usually mention in the beginning. Flint, leaded gasoline, sometimes people think about old toys, and paint in old homes is definitely the big one. Sometimes it's through paint chips, and more commonly it's through deteriorating old paint that turns into lead dust. And it doesn't take very much dust for a child to start feeling the symptoms of lead poisoning. And it only takes about a sugar packet's worth of lead dust for a child to have symptoms of lead poisoning. So why is it still an issue? In our community, we're very fortunate that we've made a lot of progress. One of the main things that the coalition pushed for when we first organized was the City of Rochester Lead Ordinance, which I'll get into later, and that really helped us reduce the amount of kids who were being exposed to lead. But there are still hundreds of children being exposed in Monroe County each year. The county puts out a report every year, and the most recent data from 2018 showed that about 500 kids were tested positive for lead. And that's 500 new kids, so that's on top of whatever number was from previous years.
Is that countywide?
Yes, yeah. And also a big reason why it's still a problem here is because of Rochester's old housing stock. About 55% of all houses in Monroe County were built before 1978, and that's the date when the US government banned lead paint. So that's a lot of potential lead hazards, and it's not just the houses whose paint is deteriorating, it's also the historic homes that people fall in love with and then they renovate, and then they're tearing down walls, they might be like replacing windows, and they're spreading the paint that might still be there underneath whatever new paint is there. So like I mentioned, it only takes a sugar packet's worth of lead dust for a child to start feeling the effects of lead poisoning. It can cause a range of issues like irritability, stomach aches, loss of appetite, and on the more extreme end, like you mentioned, it can cause ADD, low IQ, behavioral issues, speech and language issues, all things that you as educators and school administrators would definitely be experiencing in the classroom. And 1 and 2-year-olds are the most vulnerable to ingesting the lead dust, because if you think about what a 1 and 2-year-old is doing, they're crawling, they're putting things in their mouth, they're living between the window and the floor, which is that space that is most likely to have that lead dust that settles from someone opening a window or from opening a door or from the walls. And it can also affect adults in other ways too. If a pregnant woman was exposed enough to lead poisoning earlier in their lives, the baby can absorb some of that lead from her body. So what happens is that if a child is exposed to lead enough, it can get absorbed into our bones, because for some reason our body can't tell the difference between calcium and lead. So when a woman is pregnant, the baby's looking for calcium, especially if she's calcium deficient, it can start pulling calcium from her bones and then get poisoned in the womb. And there are some studies that even link lead poisoning to higher rates of crime, dropout, and even higher rates of dementia. Because if we go back to that thought about the bones, if you think about what happens when we get older, our bones start to soften, they might break, and if you were exposed to lead previously and it accumulated in your bones, there's a chance that if your bones are breaking, they're re-exposing you to that lead and potentially increasing the chances of you developing dementia. So the main messages that we push as the coalition, the first one is getting your child tested at 1 and again at 2. It's New York State law for all doctors to test 1 and 2-year-olds, but one of the biggest problems we have in Rochester is that our testing rates are stagnating, and that's for a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's because the doctors don't honestly know that lead is still an issue around here, or that they should be pushing it at well child visits. And it's also because those visits are very hectic. Asking a parent to, give their child one more blood draw can be very overwhelming. So it's a combination of making sure that both the healthcare providers understand that it's important to push this issue, and that parents are comfortable and confident in asking their doctors about a lead test.
What percent of kids actually get those 2 checkups?
That's a good question. I haven't actually looked at what the drop-off rate is. If parents get it usually at 1 and sometimes at 2. Anecdotally, I've heard that a lot of times if they get the first blood test, they'll get the second one. But I know that can be a struggle for especially community organizations that are working with children. Sometimes they have to require the parent to have that blood test as part of whatever program the parent's in. So I have heard that can be a problem. So they get it once, they don't get it again, they don't realize they're supposed to get it twice. But I don't know the exact numbers on that, so that's a good question. I'll have to follow up with that. So once a child is tested for lead, if the test comes back positive, then the doctor has to report it to the Monroe County Department of Health, and then they will work with the parent to find out what is exposing that child. And we're really lucky that our Department of Health is very thorough. They will go everywhere that the child is spending time to see what the lead source could be. If they're spending a lot of time at grandma's house, they'll go to grandma's house. If they go to daycare, they'll go to daycare. And there have been lots of cases of these far out lead hazards that you would have never thought that they could find, and our health department found them. One example is that there was a little girl whose dad was a contractor who worked in old buildings a lot, and she was actually getting poisoned from the dust in her dad's beard. And there was another case too where there was a child whose family was from India, and they used this cosmetic called surma as part of their religious practices, and the grandparents were bringing back the original surma from India, and the health department found that that was what was poisoning the child. So that's to say that our Department of Health is very thorough, and we're very lucky to have them. And it's also worth mentioning that if a family doesn't have insurance or a healthcare provider, they can request a free blood lead test from the county for any child up to age 18.
Can a child be all of a sudden get lead poisoning then?
Yeah, there are different circumstances that they might not have been exposed to lead in the past, but maybe they moved into an older home and then they, are at home a lot and inhaling the lead dust.
I mean, usually they say they're young and then there's some type of brain damage when they're young.
Right.
Can there be when they're older too?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this actually a little bit before you walked in.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
You don't have to then. Yeah.
No, I'm happy to. So you're right that lead poisoning can affect brain development when a child is growing, especially because that's a critical part in their development. And if they're exposed as a child, it can lead to other issues later in life. There is a connection, some studies show, between lead poisoning and dementia, because lead poisoning, if a person is exposed to lead enough, they can absorb it into their bones. So if when that person gets older and their bones soften or break, it can re-release the lead into their body. And there are also other effects that as an adult, if you're exposed to lead, you can have that are a little bit different from children's symptoms. Like it can affect heart failure, kidney failure, hypertension, sexual dysfunction. It has a very wide-ranging effects depending on age.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the other message that the coalition pushes a lot is getting your home tested. Any resident in the city of Rochester can request a free home lead inspection if they call a specific number, which I can mention now, but is also in these brochures that I can pass around later. And that number is 585-428-6520. And if that person is a tenant, their landlords are legally responsible for addressing any lead hazards that are found from that home inspection. And what will happen is that if someone takes advantage of that inspection and there are lead hazards found, then the city will open up a case on that landlord. And if the landlord doesn't comply with addressing those hazards within a certain period of time, they will withhold rent from them until they do. So this is where I talk about the Rochester City Lead Ordinance. So one of the main reasons why our community has made so much progress is because of this local ordinance that says that all buildings that want to be used for commercial use, including renting, have to pass a lead inspection as part of their inspection process to get the certificate of occupancy, which is the legal document that lets them operate. And if they are a rental building with 1 or 2 units, they have to renew this inspection every 3 years because those buildings tend to get higher turnover. And you can actually, if you're a resident of the city of Rochester, you can go on the city's website and look up your address to see the last time it was inspected and if there were any lead hazards found from that. So if you just Google City of Rochester property info, they have a map and you can Google your address and it'll show you all inspections that they've done, including lead, and if there were any lead hazards found and if they've addressed it. So we really like to educate families and parents to know that they have these legal rights within Rochester and Monroe County to live in a safe and habitable home, and that they have resources that they can use if they feel like they need to use them for their living situations. And so what is the coalition doing? We're presenting to groups like you, distributing educational materials, leading public service campaigns. And we also, we're a coalition of a lot of different players, including the city and the county, community organizations, healthcare providers. And we like to be that resource that helps people navigate the system, because navigating the system, especially for a parent who just found out that their child has lead poisoning, can be very overwhelming. And they might not know what to do, what the next steps are, who they should talk to. So we like to be the resource provider that will help you get to where you need to go. So with that being said, I will pass around our brochures that has our website info. So please feel free to visit our website if you ever encounter a family in your work or in your personal life that they are going through these this difficult time like this and they don't know what to do. We're definitely there as a resource, and they can contact us and reach out for questions. So, can I answer any questions that you have? Or yeah.
Andrea, I heard it's pretty expensive to get this remediation done. From what you said, if I understood it properly, commercial properties and rental properties, there's a mandate about things being inspected to get the C of O. What if someone has a single family home and they voluntarily contact the city and say, please give me the free lead test? What's the legal implication if the test says that there is some issue?
That's a great question. So two things is that the city can't force a homeowner to do remediation.
They can or they cannot?
They cannot. They cannot. If there is hazards found, but that inspection will go on that unit's record. So if they try to sell their home, then they legally have to inform the buyer that there was lead found in that home. And the city of Rochester also recently had funding renewed to be able to provide financial assistance to landlords and homeowners who are looking to do that lead remediation and abatement work. So to temporarily and permanently remove lead hazards from homes. So if you go to the City of Rochester lead program website, they have information about it's a deferred loan program that homeowners and landlords can sign up for if they're looking to do that work.
So it's not a grant, it's a loan?
Yes, I'm sorry, it's a loan, but it's not expected that the homeowner or landlord has to pay it back unless another inspection is done where they violate the lead hazards.
Do you know if it varies by zip code, the coverage for this program?
I know it's citywide. I believe it used to be countywide, and I'm not exactly sure if it extends outside of the city.
Thank you.
Years ago, a group of us went to the county executive who was in control at that time and said, you pay the bills and you don't even know what you're paying for. So he went and got some, from the governor at the time, some extra code inspectors and asked the city to accept them, that anybody who was on social services, they were doing a move-in, move-out form, checking it for it's okay when they moved in, okay when they moved out. And then maybe about 3 months later, we were at City Hall, and some people from the health department came in, said they were looking for a means to check on the lead houses, and we said, hook on to this. So tell me, is that now gone, this move in, move out, and the health department's part of it at that time?
So you're referring specifically to people who receive housing assistance?
Right.
So the Rochester Housing Authority within the city manages all of those properties. So that's that they work with the county health department to do those lead inspections, and they are also on the coalition. So they're pretty thorough about it. They do have to renew those inspections every 3 years. Actually, I think they do it.
But this was every time someone moved in, there was a move in, move out.
So I know that that's still part of their process. I don't
Yeah.
know if a lead inspection is specifically attached
It's
to
too
the
bad,
move-in
yeah.
route, but
'Cause
they,
it was a great means, they did hop on it at the time.
yeah, they still, they do their lead inspections more frequently than the county health department. So they're pretty,
I hope.
yeah, they're pretty on top of
Yeah.
the lead inspections, but I know that that can be definitely a concern for people who live in
Yeah.
apartments. Yeah.
And we pay the bills as taxpayers, we would like to see people have nice dwellings.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I agree with that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can the damage be undone?
That's also a good question. So there's no cure for lead poisoning. You might have heard of a term called chelation, which is if usually a child or anybody has a certain threshold of lead in their system. This is like usually for extreme cases. They can undergo the chelation process, which is basically flushing their kidneys to help process the whatever lead's in their body. But that can only helps with whatever lead is still in their blood. If there's been any lead that's absorbed into their bones, then that's permanent.
Wow.
So you can't have extra doses of milk and calcium through the milk?
Yeah, that's another good question. Calcium, it's increasing your calcium in your diet is not a cure. Like if you live in an old home and it has lead dust, you can't drink 2 glasses of milk a day and be cured of lead poisoning. But like if you're calcium deficient, and increasing your calcium in your diet can potentially lower the risk that you're absorbing it into your bones.
Interesting.
So, especially like with pregnant women, that's why encouraging, prenatal vitamins and supplements is really important to make sure that their baby is not pulling calcium from their bones.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Andrea.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for letting me come today.
hey, it's a pleasure. And if you ever decide to stop in again,
Yes.
you're always welcome.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you guys for the work that you do.
Okay, we had a new person walk in here. Mary, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Mary Coffey, Northwood Village, but of course, as all citizens of Rochester, very interested in the education for the sake of our children.
Great. Great. Well, delighted to have you
I'm
here.
a friend of Colleen's too,
Yes, I
who has
gathered
been
that.
very active and very conscientious of what's happening to our children.
Yeah, we're very interested in trying to get all the neighborhoods to, work together on a lot
Yeah.
of these things.
You'll have to come to many neighbors, building neighborhoods, and give a presentation to all the neighborhoods,
Okay.
because, boy, we're really bad if we're not taking care of
Yeah.
our kids.
Yeah. Okay. The next thing we have on here is the community forum, which gets into a lot of issues going on in the in Rochester schools. One thing I wanted to touch on while it crosses my mind, that follows up on the Lead Coalition thing. Back when Ralph Spezio was running a school, there's a school 17, I don't know if you've been over there to check it out yet. He started that school back in the early 90s, late 80s, and really turned it around into a model school. And he got things working so well there in terms of a lot of community involvement, kids really getting all the support they needed. He brought in a medical facility and dental and all sorts of support services, kind of the I don't know if there were any other community schools back then, but he was certainly did a great job there. And it was thanks to all of that, those wraparound services that tried to take care of everything that the kids needed, that he started seeing there were still some kids that were just explosive. You know, the least thing would set them off. It was still a struggle to keep them quiet and learning. And it turned out, he found out after really trying to figure out what's going on with these kids, they had lead poisoning. And that's one of those things that you deal with schools in a town like Rochester, and there are so many problems that the kids are living with that you sometimes don't see things until you clear all these problems out, and then you see some other things. And that was what started the whole Monroe County lead abatement program, and he left 17 to follow that up. And 17 went downhill, you know, because so often it's the principal that determines
Yes, the head.
the school.
Yeah.
So there is a video on YouTube where he presents this, and John and I, when we got started fighting for School 16, that was one of the videos that we got to see and gave us a feel for what we were going to be fighting for in terms of the schools in Rochester that we were getting renovated, that we wanted to also have them become community schools. So that's a good video for an oversight of what the community school model is like, as well as getting into the lead abatement. So the item number 4 on the agenda is the October 29th Community Forum, which is next Tuesday. Things have been happening hot and heavy. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you before, because we've been flat out getting things ready for one meeting after another. And the community forum on the 29th is down at the Brockport University Downtown Center at 161 Chestnut Street. And the hope is to cover a number of issues that if you go on location19.org, which is on that, I wrote it down on the agenda here. It's fairly easy to type in. You'll see, if you scroll down the main page, you'll see the top part, a little box that looks like this, and if you click on that, you'll get to the full page. And then over here in red and just about in bold black, there are 2 hot links that get you to additional information about this forum. You can pass that around if you'd like. That's I've got one more. So you can glance through. This is the when you go on and press check the highlighted dark link on that page. It'll get you to a document that covers what's in these, and you can pass that around if you would. It's a fairly lengthy document. In fact, the meeting before last, and all our meetings are online if you want to look at them. We had Dan Dermisage come in to talk about one of the earlier versions of this document, which had gotten its start because of the referendum that was being proposed for Rochester to eliminate the current school board and appoint one, and there was a lot of folks who thought that that was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The board may need a little help, but it's, you know, it's thanks to their listening to us that we were able to get the schools renovated, that we got renovated, and there's a lot to be said for having a responsive school board. But anyways, they came up with a number of proposals to try to bring some additional structure to the school board and the way the school board worked with the superintendent. And that's something that you can look at. And what they're planning on doing at this event is they'll be handing this out to everyone, and also there's another sheet that when you click on the red link on that page, it brings you to a page that gives you choices for things that you'd like to talk about. So there'll be a presentation, and each of the folks that are going to be trying to summarize each of the points being made here. I'm supposed to cover item number 2 there, which
What's the name
is...
of the document?
Pardon?
What's the name of the document?
The document that we've got here is recommendations to ensure Rochester City School District students succeed. And I'm going to be covering community schools and the 1.5 mile busing requirement, which, if you haven't heard yet,
I have.
you have to work to get that eliminated, you know, because that is killing our schools. And you haven't been here, but we...
I mean, I believe in community schools.
Yeah, and what you know, if you were to hear somebody say, we're going to pass legislation that keeps parents from poor parents from visiting their child's school, everybody would be up in arms and say this is ridiculous. But we in effect have that
Every day.
because of this 1.5 mile busing law, which was probably conceived to handle small towns where...
And what does 1.5 miles mean?
It means that the state will only reimburse the city school district for bus rides that are longer than 1.5 miles. So if they send a kid across town, they get reimbursed. If they pick him up and take him 3 blocks over to his neighborhood school, they don't get reimbursed.
So the city themselves are pushing this for monetary reasons.
Well, the city has been trying to eliminate the 1.5 mile requirement for some time because it's destroying neighborhood schools and making community schools
But
harder.
you can still have a community school.
Well, you
People
want to
walk.
distinguish between neighborhood and community. So neighborhood means in that geographic area,
Yeah.
that's where your population comes from.
Yeah.
And community school means you've got resources out of the community that are coming into the school. That's
So
the
it's
difference
a whole different thing.
Whole different concept.
Wraparound services means community schools.
Oh, well, then that's, that should be said wraparound.
Yeah, well-
Yeah, I'm thinking it's neighborhood.
But I think the effect that's happening with the busing is that, to my understanding, and anyone please correct me if my misinterpretation here, but I believe what's happening is that parents are being told that they will only get access to busing if the school that their child attends is more than 1.5 miles from the building that they live in.
Right.
And so in effect, they are because they want their child to have access to busing, that means they have to register for a school that's further away from their house, which means that we no longer have as many schools that serve directly the children that live in that particular neighborhood.
So it comes back to neighborhood.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
It is what it is, but it is.
Yeah.
So what do they want to change it to, a half a mile or less?
0.
Yeah, 0. So
Zero.
I think any
Zero.
child should have
If it's
access to a
almost
bus
like
to
it,
get
you know,
to
It's easier
school.
to administer. Then you don't have to go on the map and figure out how far it is.
So then which child is they can get on that bus?
Any child who's, you know, they'll sign up for the school they want to go to,
Yeah.
and then if it's, you know, 2 blocks over, if they want to be bused there, fine. If it's a real safe neighborhood and the parents,
There'd be a lot of buses, wouldn't
well,
it?
they're
Well, there's a lot of buses now.
Right.
yeah, they're
It's actually
busing
fewer.
80% now. You know, you're busing 80% of the kids, you know, roughly.
It's crazy. Crazy.
Well, and if you think about the bus routes now, if you have a child coming from, let's say, way out in the 19th
Right.
ward somewhere that's attending school in Beechwood, then you have to have a bus that's going out to them and then going over to Beechwood, right?
Right.
Whereas if you have students mostly going to schools within their neighborhood, you could have actually fewer bus routes that pick up all along that one
Oh,
area.
I
and
am
drops
for,
off.
you know, I helped out in the poverty initiative area on Main Street, MRT, which is, it's a whole nother story. And one of the things they wanted was community schools, which they said neighborhood. So Beechwood, of course, was the big man on campus, so they immediately gave them School 33. Then there was Emma, which is a neighborhood on the other side, which would have gone over into North Whitten Village too, and asked that it was closer for them to have their children in that neighborhood, School 38 become their destination, 28, their destination school. And they were told, no, there was no way they could do that because that has become now a school for Hispanic children. And there was no way the neighborhood children could participate and make that a neighborhood school, which was very hard for the Hispanic children who were in a different part of town too. So I think the school district has had a part of chopping this
Yeah.
up too.
School
Yeah.
choice. School choice did enable this.
Well, when it's all Hispanic and they say this is a school designated for Hispanic, I don't think that's school choice. I think the city school department has set that up.
Yeah, I think that there have been, you know, and we've been fighting this for several years now, and there are various silos in the school district, you know, and certainly the people who are in charge of busing or placement have some of their views on what's important, and it's hard to get everybody completely in sync. In theory, everybody would like to have, you know, open busing, so universal busing, so anybody can go to any school. But there is a lot of advantage to some departments in the schools to have this flexibility to bus kids all over creation, because now you can, for instance, with having a Hispanic school, you can have one building that has a lot of Hispanic support, and you don't have to do that and replicate that in every other school.
Right. And you understand that, but they did say it was not close to the Hispanic community where the parents could have the participation, which
Yeah.
they should. You
Yeah.
have to have the parents be part of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that School 17 has a lot. There's a lot of Hispanic families in that neighborhood, and you know, each school is going to have a little bit of a different personality depending on what the local population is like.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and that can be good, and sometimes, you know, what will work in one school may need a little adaptation in another. And one of the things that, you know, because there are a lot of folks who have reservations about charter schools, you know. And one of the things you really need to solve all the problems that the city schools got, rather than just, you know, that we dealt with one charter school that came here and gave us presentations, but they're looking at using all the busing that the city school provides. So they're still drawing kids from all over creation, and they're going to have all those problems of having difficulty getting parents to be involved with the school. Charter schools can sometimes, well, you just leave here if you aren't involved with the school, you know, so they can get rid of some students that the city school couldn't do because they're left having to educate all the children.
I do think, I know that from, and I do not want to speak at all for all charter schools because I'm working on developing one, right? So I cannot speak for the practices that happen at other schools. I know that by state mandate, a school is not allowed to ask a child to leave the school. And so I don't know what's happening behind closed doors in other places, but I do know that if a charter school is living up to its charter, which is the document that provides it the authorization to work, right? That they should not have a practice of encouraging students to leave.
10% leave and go back to the city.
Right. And so I think that is an unfortunate impact, because you would hope that a child that started at a school would feel that strong sense of community and be engaged, and that they would want to stay at that school. So I think that should be the intention of all, and I don't know if that's the practice here.
It's not.
The charter schools are raised like volcanoes because of the failure of the public schools.
Yeah.
Never would have had to have charter schools. But it was another way to try to make things better.
I thought when the state, and the U of R had to take over East High School, that part of doing what they are doing is that a lot of the students had to leave because they couldn't afford to
Well,
do.
they reassign them to different parts of the city school district.
What's the difference between telling somebody you can't be at the school versus getting a letter in the mail, hello, you're now reassigned to, how is that working with the state law that you can't, that doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know. And I know that East is a part of the district, so I'm not sure what might be happening there.
And it's being a neighborhood with East High School that was a terrible situation at one time. Met with the mayor at the time as head of the neighborhood group, and the chief of police, and head of the school board, and the kids were leaving 24/7, doing drugs behind the buildings, and we were told, well, there's too many doors. And the mayor, they had no control over it. They had no control. That they knew that school was controlled by the teachers, and I believe the teachers union, and they knew what they could do or not do. And I will tell you, I have nothing but praise for East High School and what they're doing inside today. Everybody keeps saying it's the children, it's the families. Well, I know there's problems, but these children, they're doing 100 times better. And you can see it on their faces when they're coming out of school. And you can see they feel that they're wanted and they're loved. And all families have problems. So we can't keep saying it's families. And
What they're doing at East is excellent from everything I've heard.
You would have had to live it before and after
Yeah.
to say it can work.
I visited for a literacy PD a few weeks ago and was blown away by listening to the teachers talk about the intentionality behind the literacy program there, and the way that they are helping students excel in reading so quickly. It's truly incredible.
And how they treat the student. We had a special program there honoring our police on our side of the city. And we asked if the football team could welcome the guests. And they were wonderful, shaking hands and the interaction with the teachers was just commendable. I mean, it was wonderful.
Mhm.
So it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, and we need to see that happening at all the schools.
Yeah, and I'm sure will. You got people like you, I'm sure will. Keep pushing.
Keep trying. Items on number 4, if you get a chance, come to the event on the 29th. I did put the time here, but I think is it 4 to 6:30 or something like that. If you go on the site and look at what's online, it'll give you the times and so forth. And, hopefully it will get some thinking about all of these various issues and give people a chance to discuss this, because not everybody, looks like you've gotten a good initiation from talking to the various neighborhoods and schools of what some of the things are that are helping or hurting, but it's not always obvious to everybody.
John, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
about this event? Are these breakout sessions, or is this a whole calendar of events that anyone attending is going to go from?
Yeah, well, the plan is that they will have people stand up and talk for about 3-4 minutes about each of the topics.
Okay.
And there are 8 in this document. You can send that around to if somebody hasn't had a chance to read through it.
There's one over here. And it's online too, I believe, right?
Pardon?
It's online as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they can, they'll be spending about 5 minutes reviewing some of the highlights of each of the points there, and then the folks they'll divide up into groups, depending a bit on how many people are there. If you've got 25 people there, which hopefully is at the low end of the range, you may just have one group and have everybody talk, and that avoids having to go through and bring all the individual groups back together and cover what they've each discussed. If we end up with 100 or 150 people, then we'll break up into probably one group to cover each of those topics, and people can divide up based on what their interests are. And when you sign up online, you can pick the topic you'd like to cover. And for people who haven't signed up online, they're welcome to come anyways. So that's something that probably is worth doing if at all possible for you. The community engagement teams in Rochester, there are 10 schools that went into receivership, and 10.
Yeah.
And
Some are already there.
so, yeah.
So,
Well, it was mostly 10 new ones, I think.
Yeah.
There are 10 new ones.
Yeah.
what's the percentage?
10 out of 40?
Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
So we've got 4 in the Southwest here, and I'm with the Southwest Common Council, and the 19th Ward is part of the Southwest Quadrant. So we've been looking primarily at schools that are in the Southwest, and we've got School 10, 16, 19, and Wilson Foundation Academy, which is on Genesee Street there, that are in receivership, and we've been trying to cover all the schools, and John's been involved with School 19 and
No, 16.
16 and 10 primarily, and I try to get to all of them, but it isn't always easy. sometimes they schedule their CET meetings at the same time.
John, what is the CET?
Community engagement team. So the community engagement team is something that all the community schools are supposed to have, and also schools that are in receivership have to have a community engagement team. The objective being to try to get the support and resources for the community involved with the school. Like John and I sat on, School 44 was in receivership about 3-4 years ago, and we were on the team for 1 year while it dug its way out of receivership, got its performance up. And it was very interesting because you get to find out what's going on in the school, get to know the teachers and see all the good things and sometimes not so good things that are going on there, and get your 2 cents worth in for what that is worth. So right now we are working with 4 of them, and I've been videoing some of the meetings, so some of those are available on YouTube, and some of them are probably boring if you weren't there, and others are quite interesting to see the dynamics that are developing in the community
You're
engagement team.
working to bring in wraparound services into these schools. That's
right.
what your role is.
Yeah,
I think our role is more to identify them.
That's one of your things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, to try to say, gee, have you talked to this resource or that resource?
Why hasn't the school district done
There.
that?
Hey, Joe.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
John, this is sort of a mundane comment, but as
Andrea
far as
Baldino.
community engagement, anecdotally,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what it must be like, because in all my years of calling anyone in the city school district, I've never had a call returned. Typically, the phone rings and rings and rings and rings, and no one picks it up. If you finally get someone to take a message, nothing happens afterwards. Even in the past month, I had spent an inordinate amount of time trying to reach a certain school, and rather than just taking the message, the person who I finally got to speak with scheduled an appointment for me to call the principal back on X day at X time.
It's a dynasty.
Or no, the principal was supposed to call me. The principal did not call me back. I started calling the school and calling the school.
Wow.
And again, nobody picked up. And throughout the rest of the day, I continued my day at work and let it ride to see if they would ever engage me. Nope. All I got was one person said the principal had to walk somebody to their classroom at the time she was supposed to be calling you. That I understood, but you would think that a professional person would then, at some point, call somebody back or have one of their many secretaries call somebody back. And a person with good intentions who's trying to reach out to these people and engage them, and I'm head of the darn neighborhood association, and they still, I get zilch.
What school was that
I'm not
you're
gonna
at?
say.
No. Okay.
Well, go.
No, because I want to work with them, so I don't want to say who they are.
Correct
I've
without.
had more luck than that. It's like with the central office, I had an issue, I called my phone, emailed down, got an email back, emailed again, got the email back. And it was really rapid turnaround time. And Joe's response is when I call him.
That's good.
Well,
glad it's not me.
you're probably pretty well known.
Yes.
They'll respond to who they know is.
Yeah. Joe is principal at 29, and so he's been
And how's your
a good
school?
friend and coming frequently to these meetings.
Tell me, is this Wilson Commence? Is that Wilson High School?
It's
No, 'cause that
the
used
new
to be-
Madison
Oh.
that
Wait a
they.
minute, commencement is high school,
Did I have
foundation is probably the one that you're
Wilson
supposed to
commencement?
say.
Oh.
I mean, that was the.
Oh,
backup
that Wilson
schools at one
commencement.
time.
Yes, that's the. Yeah, that was.
The high
We
school
we
isn't
keep
on the
hoping they will
CET
come
list.
to the
It's
meeting.
what?
The high school isn't on the receivership
Oh,
was
all right.
the
It's a
foundation one.
All right, because they used to be one of the best
Premier.
years ago.
Yeah, it was one of those things that when schools get into receivership, the city or the state requires they change their name if they don't get out of receivership fast enough.
Oh,
Just one way for the state to insult the neighborhoods by stealing the name of the school, you know. Anyways, Wilson, what is now Wilson Foundation, had been started with the intention of it being a middle school, and it was going to be called
James Madison. School.
James
That's-
Madison School.
And if you look at it, it still says it now.
Still
The
says
old
that
sign came
in
down.
granite, yeah.
Foundation sign came down. Very pleased.
And then they just put too many kids in there. There were all sorts of problems when it got kicked off. When would that have been? In the 90s, probably?
Well, when my daughter was in 7th grade,
Your daughter's in 7th grade.
that's when I opened it up.
Yeah, it was early.
And it was a zoo, I guess, from what I understand. And then it got closed as a middle school and got...
Put competing games in one school. Most of the kids came without a 3rd grade reading level or at a 3rd grade
Sad.
reading, but they were in 6th grade or below.
so may I ask a question? I mean, you're all very dedicated, and I admire you. It's very. There's an extra inch or two here that. What? I mean, God love you.
Well, you know, if you look at East High School, or look at 17 and what people have been able to do, and it's not easy, and it's thanks to some, you know, like Katerina over at School 17, she's just outstanding, and she's making a huge difference there, and you worry about what happens 5 years or 10 years from now if she's not there.
Right.
But we
And
have,
I think at East, U of R is there too.
yeah,
And that's a big thing. So what I'm saying, something outside the circle came in and made it work. Because what's going on in the circle isn't working. That's all I'm saying. So what do you think can make it work?
well, you know what we're trying to do here in the Southwest, getting the schools that are in receivership, you know, having a presence there and trying to get some cross-pollination so that Joe and Monique, who was here a little while ago, who's principal at 19 school, you know, that they're aware of what's going on in the neighborhood, know what some of the resources are, and one of the things we need to work on too is to try to get principals and teachers where possible to live in the neighborhood, or at least you know, have a lot of familiarity with the neighborhood, because right now there are so many schools where the teachers drive in, put in their hours, and then they drive out and
But at the same time, John, the kids are coming on a bus in and out.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Everybody's.
there's no sense
No
of
rules.
community, of
Connectivity.
neighborhood or community.
Yep.
You can't get that. So I think that's why we've sort of focused on the busing. If we can cure that,
And make
Okay.
the community,
yeah.
and the community start taking control of their schools.
Well, I don't know whether we need that or not.
I
We need some
think they
we
do.
need some
I think the
expertise.
unions now control the schools. That's me, don't yell at me, that's me.
No.
I think there's a lot of control there.
I feel personally, from a little bit that I've seen, that city school district staff, I haven't studied it, I just know from certain grants I've seen, people doing the same job in two different places, the city school district person is always getting paid considerably more than the person in another school district. And when I'm gonna go to that One Voice website that the superintendent put out, and I'm going to make a suggestion, which I'm sure would never happen, but that everybody in the city school district volunteer, well, that they have them a choice of keep your job and keep your colleagues' jobs, or all of you take a 3 or 4% pay cut and would save maybe $15-16 million. Now, from what, if they're already being frankly overpaid compared to other districts, if they're, you know, if you're making 100,000, 3%, it's $3,000. You can afford that probably. You wouldn't be happy necessarily, but compared to everyone through the whole system losing their jobs and the students again being the
You
losers.
mean with this oversight of monies?
With the budget over the 30 mil, what they're saying now is 30 million, who knows what it'll really be in the end, but, you know.
All I know is when we originally tried to work with East, no one could do it.
Yeah, it was in bad
It
shape.
was, that was their world, the union, the teachers there. I was even told by one teacher that if I was a friend of somebody they didn't like, they weren't gonna work with me. Well, hello, I mean, I'm, you know.
And
Now
it takes away power when principals have really excellent teachers and an excellent program.
Yes.
They build it up, and then someone with seniority bumps the nationally known teacher or the person who's been running everything. I believe in unions, but I don't believe that the unions should have such rampant control that everything is serving them rather than them serving everybody else.
Yeah, it worries you a little bit when you see how many superintendents we've had in the last 20, 30 years, and we've still got the same president of the teachers union. But, you know, maybe he's just really good.
And it's his job. He
Yeah,
is good
he
at
is
his
good at
job.
it, yeah.
His job is to protect the teachers and that, and he is doing good at his job. But right now we see that the children are not doing good. That's all. Well, you know.
So, you know, the only thing I can say is if you get very involved, you know, once you get your foot in the door, and that's the hard part sometimes, and you can come here and we'll teach you putting your foot in the door, because we've had everybody. You know, we've had Mike Schmidt here a number of times, who is in charge of all the buildings and the busing, and we've got a pretty good working relationship with most of the school board. And once you establish that, then it gets a little harder for somebody to not return your call.
Right.
So
But the community does want to. I know you talk about buses. We worked with the bus company. We had Bill Carpenter come, the bus company, and we said, can't have buses all over the place. Come in the front of the school, you line up. Well, he wasn't controlled by the school system, you know, so we could work with him. So we got that at least under control.
At East High School.
Yeah, but, and I know, I see East High School, so I know good things can happen. And good things can happen for our children in Rochester. And God love you for pushing and pushing and pushing to make it happen.
John, is there one thing, I mean, low-hanging fruit, anything that you could suggest that we take out to people in neighborhoods and say, look, we're going to start some kind of campaign, push for this, push for
Yeah,
this?
how can we get a
you know,
solve?
the busing is something that should have been fixed 7 years ago. I was listening to when we went through back in January of 2013, we had a walkthrough over at School 16, which had just been closed because it was in such bad shape, they were saying, and it needed a lot of work. And I videoed as we were going around, and I'm going through and asking questions of one person or the other, and I'm talking about the busing and shouldn't we get rid of this 1.5 mile busing thing? All these things that were so obvious. We had been involved with this for about 8 months at that point, and all of these things were becoming obvious. And why on earth all these years, they still haven't found some way of getting rid of that and getting more people from the neighborhood involved with the school.
Yes.
Over at 17, they had to get a special board resolution to get some more local busing. I think they're picking them up at the corners, but you know, it shouldn't be that hard to fix something, especially when you figure that the state is spending close to $1 billion on this
And then
city
they-
school district, and then they let something as stupid as this busing thing fester there, when in reality it's causing a lot more damage.
And they're telling us we have to ride bikes because we shouldn't be driving cars. When you say the buses, should you also say that neighborhoods, people within a certain area of their school would have first choice for that
Yeah.
school,
Mm-hmm.
along with the
But
busing?
basically, the mode of transportation should be
Yes.
no factor in their choosing where they want to go to school.
All right. And neighborhoods within a certain radius of a school.
I'll just, for an example here, take 1.5 miles from here. You're on the runway in the airport, one direction. You're downtown, and you're around school 17. So it's huge. 1.5 mile radius is huge. Okay, and within there, there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, they have a lot of
elementary schools.
choices.
Yeah. So we finally put that down, and it was a great talking point. That one slide is probably worthwhile doing in your neighborhood.
But should you, if you're a certain radius of a school, have the first priority to go to
Yes.
that school?
Yeah.
That is part of the whole plan, which also makes for neighborhood community wraparound.
You know,
The whole
the thing that
works.
really exploded the busing was in 2002. The school board passed the managed school choice policy, which was intended to have more equity in the system by giving parents the right to
Right.
pick the best school in town that their child could go to, and there'd only be maybe 100 seats there that would go to people who selected it from outside the walking space, but it gave them a chance at it. They soon found out that they could pick any school, even if it was no better than the one down the street, and that would let them put their child on a school bus. And there's, you know, you have to remember, during the same time period, you had Facebook and all sorts of social media and the internet explode, and
So-
you could find out if somebody swore at somebody on the other side of town before, you know everything that's going
Right,
on.
right.
And people
All
are
right.
deathly afraid of their neighborhoods.
To say a 1.5 miles, which is schools receive money for, they would prefer it.
Mhm.
It's broken down the whole community neighborhood
Yeah.
school concept.
And,
Bingo.
and we've got some studies that the school district did that shows that it should actually about if 1/4 of the kids who are being bused now chose their neighborhood schools, it would be break even.
Really?
And if 3/4 of the kids chose their neighborhood schools, you'd save about $4 million and something. Now, that was back in 2015, that study was done, or 2013. But, it's,
I don't think many. I see 10,000 buses around our
Yeah.
neighborhood school.
so, that's
Interesting.
the community teams, CETs, Monique, who was here a little earlier, she's had 3 meetings at her school so far. And over at School 10, we've had one, and we're supposed to have another one shortly. School 16 is on its first meeting. You were at that one. How did that go, John?
2016?
Yeah.
It was sort of playing some catch up because it's a different principle than it was in the spring. So catch up in the process. When you look at the parameters of what you have to improve on, one is the absentee rate. How many children are gone more than 18% of the time or 20% of the time. And here's an issue with busing, and both John and I talked to the principal about it. If you miss a day, first of all, you've got kids who move during the year.
Many kids.
Many, probably 20% of the kids.
Yeah,
How much,
Something
what
like-
percent did you say, John?
I'm guessing 20.
yeah.
I think I probably said 10 and 30 at different times, but so I just sort of take
It's
the number.
overwhelming.
Yeah, it's huge. And so you move and you sort of notify busing at some point in time that you moved. And it takes a while because you have to rejuggle the routes. And so if that kid was close to the school, physically close, they could walk, you could basically walk, yeah. Or send someone out to get them, walk them in. Crossing guard, can the crossing guard do that? But that's a big problem. And so 16 is now looking at failing that parameter for the year because there's kids who are already up to their limit now,
Wow.
which is scary. So the other
Yeah.
academic performance gets sort of put on the back burner a little bit, although it's expected to meet the criteria that you're supposed to meet. And the criteria are all screwy things. I'm not in the state. What's got the definition of metrics? I'll just give you one of the definitions. If I can find it. I think you're lucky I can't find it. Maybe the next time I'll bring one. There's a little chance. Okay, so here's the school violence index, of which they're green, which means they don't have that much violence. But so the school violence index is calculated by multiplying the counts of incidents reported to the educational climate summary data collection form by the weight for that incident category and summing the products.
What the hell
Is
is
this
that
Joe?
mean?
No, I just look it up online and see what it is.
Yeah. And then that's not it. It goes more than that. So it's sort of a measure of how severe the violence was, including murder, actually. And the frequency of them. And so it's just a weighted average, certain things. But it seems like a hell of a complicated form to go through every month.
Yeah.
And is that, that formula and definition is mandated from state ed?
Yeah.
And there's a high violence rate. I mean,
Some schools
a lot of our children live in war zones too, you know,
Yeah.
gunshots and drugs and.
No, I don't think, for the school, what the school was reporting was not very much of an incident. And the things they've taken in the last year have really reduced that rate, the in-school suspensions, a lot.
Yeah, and that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Just want to make note of the time.
Yep.
7:25.
Okay, so I think that, one of the things that, people should be aware of, there's a very different view of school safety. There are those camps that are looking at having metal detectors at all the doors and treating kids like criminals, and then there's the other camp that says, we don't need that. By and large, kids are pretty decent, and if you have the right atmosphere in the school, restorative justice, and have good methods for getting kids to calm down if they've had a lot of violence issues at home, that you can really have a good school environment, that you don't need to be looking at
Our children are
that.
angry, yeah. Our children are angry.
And
And they have a right to be.
so we'll keep working at it. And School 29 and School 44. I did get an email from one of the teachers at 44, saying that she's doing pre-K right now and put in about 10 hours a day because they're putting in all the information about each of the kids into the computer system. So she's apologizing for not making it here because she's been here several times. But things are going along at School 44, and I did send information because one of the things that the 19th Ward is doing is the spelling bee, which gets School 10, 16, 19, and 44 involved, and so hopefully that will go well again this year. Joe, do you want to?
So we do it for 10 years.
You do what?
The spelling bee, this is the 10th annual.
Oh, all right. Nice,
What grades are involved in that?
3, 4, 5, 6.
nice.
It used to be 7 and 8 when more than one school had a 7 and 8.
Yes.
And the winners, and if there's 2 people who tied, then both winners get $500 scholarship when they go to school, when they go to
Oh, nice,
post-secondary school.
nice.
And the Community Foundation pays that.
Wow, oh, yeah.
Do you have
Foundation's great.
something for School 29, Joe?
Well, we've had a good fall. We had the playground, the garden with the fence. We're going to decorate that next year, and we're trying to do some community outreach, get into the neighborhoods. Did the bollards last year. Was kind of uneven response. It really was kind of not as organized as we wanted it. So we repainted them all white for this year, and then we're having our art teacher work with children to try to do that. Neighbors really appreciate those things a lot, and we're going to hopefully move into some other spots that have bollards. We did look outside here in the library. The bollards were done with our art teacher a few years ago, well received. I think those are good for the children, get them outside, get some community outreach, and work with the neighborhood. Our area of main focus this year is enrollment, and you're speaking about neighborhoods. We do have a program we are to start without much cost to provide a 815 before school program, and that's something we're going to build on. So I will be coming back to this group in the next meeting. Maybe we'll start talking and speaking about some strategies to try to keep people in the neighborhood, because I think we have a good school, we have a very diverse school. In our district, most of our students are students of color, but diverse in the sense of many students with multiple disabilities, which makes us a very unique climate, but a very nice climate. And it's a beautiful place where things are going on positive from children with disabilities. So we're going to look at...
Is that before school program happening or going to be?
Oh no, it's already on. I have 2 people. It didn't take a lot. I just added a half an hour to two of our paraprofessionals' work days. Unfortunately, they don't make a whole lot of money, so it's 1 hour a day that's not costing us a lot of money out of our school operating budget. And that's very important, because any parent that lives in the neighborhood that would put a child on a bus at 8:15 to send them across town can now just bring them to our school, and we give preference to the neighborhood students, so they can just, that's their bus. That's their babysitting in the morning, which is really what the busing is in a form of childcare. So we really want to build it. We only have 1 kindergarten section right now, and that's not good for our future, because you can't grow with 1 kindergarten section. So there's a south zone has a problem. I'm told it's a lot to do with charter schools in this area. I didn't realize, I don't know how many there are, but they're draining our children. The only way you not beat charter schools is by having a good option for them. Mm-hmm. And parents do see when they send their children to charter schools, if you like the regimented, sometimes militaristic environment that they provide, then that may work. It may work for your family. We are a restorative school. We do have a good climate. We don't allow students fighting. We have some students who are fighting. We do have to sometimes suspend children. We have 2 5th graders out for a few days now for that, but we don't have a lot of it. And I think we have a pretty good, environment for children, but we need to market ourselves. But I think the bollard painting, the fence construction, the fence painting are all good branding things. I know I was speaking to someone at the district level, and when parents are deciding to make choices for their children next year for kindergarten, there's a lot of social media things that I'm not even aware of. I know they're out there. The district uses them to get communication, because our parents of our children are in their early 20s. Even if they have a child who's 20 years old or 25 years old. So there's a lot of that we're going to start to do. It's a really major initiative for us. If we don't do that, we're going to be in trouble. You can't have school sustain that one kindergarten class every year. The handwriting would be on the wall for us. I heard the most recent thing I heard, I don't know where we are with the state now, but we're supposed to have our facilities modernization done. It's supposed to be done during this coming school year, 2020, 2021. Now that wasn't approved because of whatever that political things that go on. So now I'm told that it's 122 school year, which is still 1 year ahead of what the original plan was, which was 22, 23. So that will help us. That will help our children with disabilities. We're ADA compliant, but we're barely ADA compliant. The building was built in 1965.
So we have to move out for a year?
There will be another year. The other thing in our building that's really crumbling is our infrastructure, the piping system, the steam heat. It's all underground. It's through concrete, and there's numerous problems. Every time you fix one thing, the pressure changes over here and blows a hole in something else. So that's a huge issue too. The infrastructure of our school is not acceptable right now. And well, it's, as I said, 54 years old, the school is. So that gives you some ideas. So those are some things going on, but the major initiative for us is enrollment for next year. We're making that a major project. We're thinking of doing, I'm actually going around knocking on doors, and we were thinking about having staff even go out and do that in our neighborhood, offer parents an option. And we need, all we'll need really is 45 children, which I don't think is impossible. We get children from across the district.
Yeah, that's what.
45 total children. That's 2 sections of kindergarten. We can do that.
Yeah,
That's our goal.
That's what 17 did to get their local enrollment up. Is go door to door and invite people to consider having their child go to that school.
And we can start the morning. And for parents who have that problem again about putting the child on the bus, because now they can bring them to school at 8:15. That's a big selling point. Besides the whole fair environment and wanting to be in school.
Yeah.
All the libraries seem to have these programs for young parents and children.
Yes.
And if teachers were like the people that came to the library to read to the little kids, at an early point in that child's life, they could be connecting with the parents and maybe planting the seeds for them to go to the local school rather than somewhere else that you would prefer that they not be.
Well, we have a lending library, little free lending library, which is on the corner right where the fences are now installed, and it's starting to grow a little bit there too. We put a lot of books in there. I know parents use them, so we're hoping to build off of that a little bit too. So more positive publicity for the school, positive feedback. That's my report there.
See, did you have anything for the youth build, Eleanor?
New cohort starting November 4th, 17 to 24-year-olds learn construction. We're connecting with City Roots Community Land Trust as a way for students to do on-site work experience. They focus on affordable housing for city residents. The Rotary Southwest has a change in meetings. They're going to be meeting at 6 o'clock the first Thursday of the month. Instead of 2 8 in the morning meetings, the first Thursday is going to be a 6 o'clock at night meeting. We think that's going to help with, providing people's choices for attendance. And we have an induction ceremony on December 5th at Carlson Commons to welcome new members.
Great. Okay. Lindsay, did you have anything you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I'll try to be brief with our time here. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I moved to Rochester about 2 months ago with the intention of trying to make a change or an impact in education in Rochester. Currently, I'm working with an organization to provide me with leadership development. I'm coming from teaching in New York City. I was teaching computer science. And so right now, I'm working on developing a proposal for a charter school. We are considering a girls' STEM school, potentially serving grades 4 to 8, specifically thinking about how we can engage young women in the fields of technology, science, and math, and thinking about where we lose our young women, particularly thinking about stereotype threat around what it means to be a scientist, and also how we might be able to engage young women just around the identity of being lifelong learners and how that might change their trajectory over time. We are in the very, very early stages of development. The school itself would not open for 2 more years if we stay on the timeline that we're on now. And so we're just initially exploring where in the city this might best fit. We'd love to be able to partner in specific with a community to be able to have what we're talking about, this neighborhood school where our students are neighbors with one another, and we think that there's a ton of value in that. So I'm just looking for feedback on our ideas and looking to really learn from the community to better understand the needs and also the strengths so that we can develop a school that really authentically reflects the community.
Where are you from, hon, and what's the name of the organization?
So I'm proposing a school that's called Innova Collegiate Academy.
What is it?
Innova, it's a Latin word that means to innovate.
Right.
We believe that all students have the ability to be problem solvers and innovators. And I'm from Maine originally, but have been in New York City most recently. So like I said, I'm very upfront about the fact that I'm new to Rochester and have a ton of learning to do when it comes to really understanding education in the city. And I intend to do that before we open our school doors, that's for sure, certain.
And
Great.
you're trying to get a cohort of female students, grades 4 to 6?
Ultimately, we hope to be grades 4 to 8.
4 to 8.
We would be opening under a slow grow model, which means we would be starting probably with just 2 cohorts of 4th and a 5th grade, and then we'd be looking to build up 1 grade each year through the 8th grade.
It's sort of, in a way, ironic. It seems to me that so many people have left the city because of this school district. And now there's people coming in who want to have young students. The neighborhoods, I would think, where you're going to find the most young people are going to be probably the poorer neighborhoods where people didn't have the options when things got to not be so good. They didn't have the ability to pick up and leave and go somewhere else.
Right.
So you're going to have students with all those built-in challenges like what everyone's been talking
Oh,
about.
and that's why they're
Absolutely.
saying the city schools are going down in numbers because of the charter schools. Yeah.
But that's not to say that you shouldn't stay and fight the good fight and get something going for these kids.
I think ultimately we believe that students and families deserve access to high quality schools, and I think that we see a number of high quality schools in the Rochester City School District. There are schools that are doing incredible things, right? And so my intention is certainly not to try to pull students from great schools. I think more about the families and students who are at schools that are not being able to provide them with the education that they might deserve, and I'm looking to provide basically just another option for parents who might be interested in having their young women all together in a school.
And where have you opened schools before?
I have never opened a school
No,
before.
not you, hon, but your organization.
Yes, so the leadership organization I'm working with, so the organization itself actually doesn't open the schools, they just provide the leadership development. I think previously we were talking about the importance of the leader of the school being, having a very large capacity, so they help with that training. Their fellows have gone on to open schools all across the country.
And you're backing, who backs you as an organization?
So we would be authorized by the state.
The state.
So we can go either to state education or we can go to SUNY.
All right.
And
So
we haven't
you're
made
a
a
private
decision.
business backed by the state that will be financed by the state.
Right. Well, the funding, there's a per pupil number that comes from the city. That's about $14,000 per student.
All right.
There is individual private funding that we can receive if we apply for it and are awarded it. And then there's also state funding for new schools that are forming.
Often wondered how that worked.
Yes, yes. I'm happy to share more.
Yeah.
Also looking to set up any individual coffee conversations with folks to get more specific feedback.
Right.
Because again, it's, I do not want to open a school without first knowing that there are people in a community that are willing to support it, right?
Doesn't the U of R have that girls' code?
Girls,
program?
yep. Girls Who Code is actually a national program, but I believe U of R is working with the Central Library on a project with that.
Okay, well, we'll be looking to hear how you're making out.
Thank you.
And we've certainly got tons of information online from what we've been doing that you're welcome to pour through.
I have one thing I want to not forget to say about,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
October 31st at RIT, the Osher Institute, they're having some kind of a seminar for a couple hours. I think people from the city school district are going to be there and others.
Institute?
I'll get the info and email it to you. You might want to put it out to some people.
Okay.
I apologize. I just impulsively started speaking in the middle of.
No, that's
your
okay.
Well, it's India.
We're like that.
Yeah,
It's now or never.
yeah,
You're
right.
If you don't say it, it'll go away,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, the thing that, if you look at location 9, and I'll send you some links to, so you get to the index pages so you can look through stuff. If there's going to be another charter school in town, we want it to be successful.
Absolutely.
And so anyways, we hopefully will hear back from you again sometime. I did get a note from Rich Coding, who is part of the Metro Justice, and they're working, trying to get Rochester for Energy Democracy going, which is intended to get, I think, solar energy into the 19th Ward and into Plex. So how successful that's going to be, I don't know. But if you get a chance, there's a meeting coming up October 30th. And I'll send you the links, Eleanor, so we can get them in the minutes. So anyways, we try to, anything we can do to reduce the poverty issue is something that helps all the schools.
It's called jobs.
Jobs, yes.
Not only is our poverty not raised, or it's not raised, it's not stayed the same, but it's gotten worse. I mean, where are we? All this stuff for poverty to initiative and that? What's going on?
Yeah, well, you close, most of the big companies have dwindled to a shadow of their former selves. Kodak,
We know
my
that,
kids,
yeah.
I was in the Kodak Park area when my kids were going to school, and the schools there were doing well. The neighborhoods, my daughter walked to school about 3/4 of a mile, and it was safe. I would think twice about walking those streets today. Things have changed a lot. So we have to look for the next.
Well, I know some of us wrote
Opportunity.
Washington DC to try to get jobs and connected with somebody in Acosta's office, or the Department of Labor. Acosta's not there anymore, and it was like we couldn't get the city to work with them. As for programs for jobs and job training, so what are you gonna do?
I don't know if anybody's got any good ideas.
Teach
There's one lady there that's going to start a new school.
We have a lot of empty buildings, Kodak being some. RT French, a lot of buildings, if we could just give to companies, come in, you can have them, give our people jobs. It's raising a lot.